I will introduce our next speaker. So we will first have a speaker and then like a short question moment, and then we'll actually interview the speaker. So it's Gustav von Sydow, who's the CEO and founder of Burt, which is a software startup that helps the advertising industry basically become clever and more creative with the data. So we're continuing the data topic. So Gustav has a background as an advertising strategist and developer, and he's also a frequent speaker actually in both national and international conferences. So it's a pleasure to hear you, Gustav, talk about big business, the happiness and hardships of building an enterprise 2.0 startup.
All right, so that was a nice song to get on. I've always wanted to have the E-Type song, like Free Like a Flying Demon. That has yet to occur. All right, so my name is Gustav, and I'm going to talk to you about the process of building a business-to-business startup, which has yet to become in fashion, but I assume it will soon. So I'm the founder of Burt, an analytics service for advertising and media. And as a lot of these advertising technology companies, the business is actually fairly complicated, but we're solving a straightforward problem in the sense that as a consumer, my experience of online advertising is just terrible. And as a media, I'm not making money off it. And the theory goes that these two are connected. So if we can make the advertising a valuable part of the experience, well, people are going to pay more for it and you're going to make money. And this is not only theory. In practice, the only company doing really well as a media property is this one. And advertising is actually part of the experience, part of the value. So many times, the links that are paid are better than the ones in the organic results. And this is not a new idea, not digital specific. It's something that these guys have been doing for the last 100 years. So if you pick up this magazine, it'll be 65% advertising. And if you ask the typical subscriber that pays for the magazine, would you like the magazine with or without the advertising? In 9 cases out of 10, they'll say, I'd like the advertising, please. And you can actually create a fairly sustainable business as a magazine with only 10,000 customers. And I assume a lot of you guys have blogs, so a lot of you guys have 10,000 readers, and you're not making shit, right? And this is why. So if you ask the typical reader of the Vogue magazine, could you give me a guess of how much is actually advertising? They'd say, well, 40%, 50%. And my point isn't that they're guessing right. The fact is that they can actually do a fairly educated guess. Whereas if the same reader were to be asked, how much of your visit is advertising? They'd have no clue. And my point is that neither does Style.com. So they have no idea of how much advertising they're putting up to people. So on a very high level, we're building a web analytics tool that allows media companies to understand their core revenue stream, namely the advertising. And we're helping agencies and advertisers to figure out how to create advertising that people actually appreciate. However, I'm not going to talk that much about our business as an ID or as a product or as a sales concept today. Instead, I'm going to talk about the startup experience. And this is kind of odd for me because I'm very much of a product, sales, and kind of an operational guy. So I don't spend that much time thinking about the concept of the startup experience. Last time I was at a conference like this was in Stockholm in 2007. This was 5 years ago. And we weren't 500 people, there were 50 of us. But what was cool was that on stage was Alex and Eric talked about SoundCloud, Andreas Ehn talked about Spotify, the J-Cut guys did a demo in the back, etc., etc. So obviously a lot of things have been happening the last 5 years. we founded Burt, for instance. Not yet to be recorded as a milestone in the history world exactly, but we didn't even have the iPhone. So people had a Nokia phone was the top model at the time. They were using Jaiku, not Twitter. I was the only one on Twitter, which felt exactly. I felt kind of like the guy in school with the wrong pair of sneakers, because I was from the wrong school. I was from the West Coast, and I had Twitter, not Jaiku. However, the experience from going from sitting like this to having a company with 30 guys, probably if you open your browser, you'll see at least one of our sites that use our product, is not something that I can do in 20 minutes, because I don't think that there are any really core truths on how you raise funding or how do you develop your product. I do think that that is part of the secret sauce of doing this. However, there are some kind of gotchas and things that you would want to know on the way. For instance, how you raise funding when you're based in Sweden or the Nordics. It's not the same as you do in the Silicon Valley or on the East Coast of the US. It's way harder. And in some ways easier. So if you have questions in terms of how you build the company from the first 5-10 guys, raising your first round, please just grab me while I'm here, search me on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever. I'll be happy to grab coffee and help you guys out. Today I'm going to talk about this, namely the experience we have as a workforce. So if you think about your free time, I would argue that that's a solved problem. You could try and create like an Instagram for video, or start competing with Spotify, or create yet another social network. But in general, I would say that our experience of online media in our spare time is amazing. Whereas in the office, we're still using the exact same tools as we have been doing for the last 30 years. So Microsoft Word was launched in, I think, November '83. And I would say that it has progressed to the worse, as opposed to the undo function. It's a brilliant innovation, that. So you get, this is what people do. Like, they don't have MacBook Pros. People still use Windows 95. And this is what they get. Whereas as a consumer, like, you actually have better tools to understand the viral spread of your cat video on YouTube than you have to make decisions on like a multi-billion-dollar scale. I find that to be slightly skewed in terms of where we spend our time. So the concept of applying lessons learned from consumer internet to the enterprise is called the consumerized enterprise. I hate these words. Could you tell? With the word enterprise comes two really promising things. The first one is that there are big problems, huge, and the market as a consequence, massive. Just to give you a sense, in the US, online advertising is a $24 billion business. The US government will spend $80 billion on IT alone. Only the government. However, with the word enterprise comes a specific set of challenges that you don't read that much about. The first one is really that as a consumer, you've usually had the problem. Probably the entire company understands the problem that you're trying to solve. Everyone has it. Whereas in our case, when we're 30 guys, I would argue that 5-6 of the team understands the problem from the customer's standpoint. The rest they just have to trust us that we're doing the right thing. So the amount of trust that goes into actually building this kind of organization to execute quickly is way more complicated. Because you need to build structure in how you learn about the customer, how do you communicate to the rest of your team. The second is somewhat related to the first one, which is that it's really hard to recruit people when they can't tell their mom exactly what they're doing, so that their mom can tell some other mom, well, my mother, you're working on Spotify. They're working on a music service. It gets harder the longer you sort of detach yourself. So recruiting the people that not only will be good enough to quickly understand the domain, but also are interested in working with something that neither of their friends and family will understand is not something that you do easily. And the third is that people actually pay for your software. So in our case, a customer would pay us $50,000, $100,000, $200,000. And if you pay someone $200,000, well, you want this to work. And not just kind of work, and you do a fail whale and people laugh at it, just it needs to work. So the problem becomes that you can't really build scale early on just by putting something out there, hoping you top the App Store list. You actually need things to scale from the start. There are no excuses. So the biggest driver of sales in any business-to-business company is customer referrals. So you could sort of guess what happens if the first 3 customers aren't happy. Things need to work. And the fourth is actually a consequence of the third one, which is that since you can't really prove your model early on by putting something out there, getting traction, getting 500,000 people to download it, it's really tough to do fundraising. It doesn't really help that people can do a photo app in a year and sell it for $1 billion. So I can sort of understand the investor perspective on this, believe me. But it is way more difficult. And also, if you're young and you perhaps haven't worked at Oracle or IBM, it's hard to prove that you understand this domain. It's possible, and if you can break through, you got a great thing. So there are challenges in doing this, but there's a big opportunity in applying what the people that do consumer internet really well on the enterprise. So it may just be that if you've worked at Oracle, IBM, SAP, Microsoft, etc. for your entire life, that may not be such a good thing in order to build the products that tomorrow's businesses will use. And the first solution is to make it really simple. I'm not sure how many of you guys have sat in front of SAP, but it's not easy. In fact, that's one of their main selling points, that it's complicated, so you can't switch. I've done this for 1,000 years. But by making it easy to get going, you can actually scale things way faster. And the second is that making it addictive. And interestingly, this actually is 2 perspectives on things. The first one is that if people don't use your product, there's not going to be any value. If there's no value, well, they're going to stop paying you because they want value, and they have someone else within the company asking them, are you getting value out of this? Are we paying them way too much money? And the second is that if you can expand your footprint, people will see these guys using your product, so it will spread virally. So that's kind of cool, right? So since people are sitting on top of each other in these office landscapes, there's a viral effect within the company. So by making it sure that people use it, other people will see it, so it can actually spread virally within the company. And the third is to start making business software human. So for whatever reason, whenever we come to something that involves business, we try to simulate efficiency. For instance, office furniture. Who would want to live like that? White, minimalistic, like a hospital. Same with software. People are so efficient that you sort of lose the human touch. And Zappos is a great example because it's not only about the experience as it is, but it's also about, how do we manage our customers? How do we make sure that they like us? And you'd be surprised of how much companies hate their software providers. So I would say this is actually the biggest opportunity to be a company with which people want to do business. And the fourth is obvious, right? The experience. The interesting thing about creating a great user experience is in consumer internet, it seems as if the experience is a way to get customers on board. Whereas in the enterprise, the experience is what keeps people using the product. And think about it this way. If someone asks you, would you want to switch to this inferior product, horrible experience, but way cheaper? Or would you want to continue using the product that you love, built by the people that you appreciate, and with this addictive experience? No one's going to recommend the company to switch just out of price. So getting the experience right is what allows you to build this moat across time. But it's not the way that you sell the product. And believe me, we've tried. So we invested tons of money into creating this beautiful web application that visualizes data. No one bought it because it didn't really package right, we didn't price it correctly. But once we did, no one leaves us. So it's worth the investment, but out of completely different reasons that you'd think. So the recipe for creating a successful business-to-business company is the same as any consumer company. The reasons for applying this is different though, but the recipe remains the same. So a simple human addictive experience, simple as that. But the challenge is to recruit the people, have the patience, get the trust from all the customers that you need in order to execute. You cannot do it from your college dorm. You need to be out there, you need to meet with customers, you need to make sure that you're right. Make sure that you price the product in a smart way so that they can sell it internally. All these different things. This is really a contact sport in a much bigger way than consumer internet ever was. You need to be out there. I'm sorry. Because this is the opportunity, right? It is about creating a workplace which people enjoy and where they get things done. This is not the workplace today. People have this tendency to separate life into work-life balance, and I think that's a mistake. I think we should apply what we like from our lives to our work, which will make not only the separation less tragical, but also it would make us more productive and better as companies. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Gustav. So I think we will do some quick questions before we invite your investor friend up. So first, just very basic, Burt. Why the name Burt?
It's a mistake, actually.
Yeah?
I'll see if I can do it this quick. So when we started the company, we wanted the company not to be named like something with 2 O's and a Z or something with ad. All advertising companies seem to have something with ad. So we said, let's do a name. Let's do something from the greatest advertising man that ever lived, Burt Bernbach. And we like, oh, sure. And then we had to fight for 3 weeks to get the name Burt as a company. And once we got it, my co-founder called me saying that, you know, we got the name wrong. And I was like, what? His name is Bill Bernbach. We confused him with Burt Bacharach, the singer. So obviously we kept it. Okay, yeah, good stuff. So you talked a little bit about the importance of the team and recruitment and so on. And I read somewhere that you focused quite a lot actually internally on the culture of the team, the culture of the company. So can you comment on this and how you actually built the company and kind of creating that team and enthusing your team and so on? To be honest, it's not really a process that I can take credit for. Okay. It's more so John, who's on vacation, ironically, is the one, that's our COO, designed that process. And we managed to recruit some really good people to manage each department. I think that's a key. So making sure that you don't have to communicate the culture onto several layers down has been a big hit for us. I also think that we may have overestimated the importance of people actually understanding what they do. That doesn't make sense. In the sense that it's so easy to try and hire for specific characteristics and skills. Whereas what you want, since this is actually kind of a long game, as I was saying, this is something you build over time. You want people to have the right attitude, the right passion. And if they do, they can pick up skills over time. So we invest quite a lot in educating our staff and making sure that they actually get to learn new things. Okay. So in terms of what you actually do, I saw a clip from something called the ATS conference, and there's a quote here.
that the fundamental issue of internet advertising, basically sucking so hard it's embarrassing to work with it, comes from you. Is this something that you're actually solving now with Burt, making it actually a better experience for all of us consumers?
I'll see. That's a quote I have to live with.
Yeah.
I do think that the fundamental issue with online advertising is that as a consumer the experience is terrible. We work a lot with both media companies and agencies to make sure that the product, meaning the context and editorial content, and the ad actually works in concert. So yes, I would say that we are solving it and have solved it in many places.
Very good.
But it's not a data problem. It's more like an experience problem. So you need to apply way softer, more new age kind of approach than what's more traditional in engineering discipline.
Okay. Emma, Nils, do we have some questions from the audience?
We do have one question. So what are some of the trends for 2012, would you say? Is it something in particular that came up this year?
For me, obviously, we bet big on the idea that ideas from consumer internet applied to the enterprise is going to become a big thing during the later part of this year. And not only sort of from the product design perspective, but also like socializing the enterprise, all these things. We're hoping that mobile will continue to grow. It's always nice when you get some dynamic within the market. I actually don't think that it matters that much. I tend to say, fuck the future, optimize for now. So if you can deliver 3 good months and think, oh, where do we want to be in 3 months? That's going to do you well. It's often very hard to look at further than that, even if you're a company with sort of revenues and more stable than such as us.
Cool. Yeah. Also, one thing we'd like to bring up before the break is that some SSCS alumni made a really sweet mobile web app for the conference. So to find it, you go to startupday.mobi, mobile. That's mobile without an L. Startupday.mobi. And the company who did it is Open Ratio. So thanks a lot, you guys. It looks amazing. Check it out.
Okay, very good. So we're not done at all. So it is a great pleasure now to actually invite Johan Englund up on stage. Johan is an investment manager with Industrifonden. And just a little bit about Johan first. Please come up, Johan. Wait. Hey.
Hey, tack.
So yes, Johan is an investment manager with Industrifonden, and you're also a very experienced entrepreneur. And the two of you will now talk a little bit about the investment that you at Industrifonden did this summer, I think. Basically invested 14 million Swedish crowns in Burt. So the idea is now to do a short interview about what kind of happens after this initial investment. Okay? This is for you, Johan.
I think maybe this
Oh, you
works.
have one? Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Looks cooler this way, though.
Let me say before he gets his act together that I think from an investor perspective in the venture capital business, the energy in Sweden when it comes to startups and really good investment opportunities is so good. So just keep up and do what you do and come to us with your ideas. It's really great to see how many good entrepreneurs we have in this country.
Excellent.
And Gustav is one of them.
Yes. Okay, so just to start off, kind of, so we'll start with you, Johan. So why did you actually choose to invest in Burt?
Well, we, as an investor, you want to see a business idea which takes on a really big problem, which can actually bring in a lot of money, both as a company, of course, in revenues, but also for the investors. We want to see an entrepreneur who can take the company all the way. A really good team is key, of course. And you want to see an entrepreneur who has a daring vision, who really wants to build a global company, a billion-dollar company, not a 100 million Swedish SEK company. And I saw that in Gustav and his team and his idea.
Yeah, very good. And for you, Gustav, I mean, so why did you seek funding, and did you specifically seek it from Industrifonden?
The reason we raised funding was essentially that we realized exactly how much investment goes into building the initial product when you build it for companies at that scale. The reason we chose Industrifonden was fairly straightforward. So we're looking at two different options, one being international and one being local. And the reason we felt strongly for Industrifonden was first that I like Johan, something that I do think is really important. But you need to remember also that it's the fund that invests, not the person. You do get the person in the beginning and hopefully he sticks around, but it is actually the Industrifonden's money. And Industrifonden as a company has proven to me and was able to convince us that they're in it for the long run. And they had recently exited ClickTech. It's probably the only, it's a BI company, probably the only substantial sort of exit in our space from this region the last forever.
Yeah.
So it made sense.
And this is something you actually also brought up when we talked on the phone, Johan, the importance of the personal chemistry kind of between the investment manager, for instance, and the people, the team in your company. Can you also comment on this?
Well, I guess it's really hard working with people you don't like. Huh? For me, and I think for most investors, that's really key, that there is a chemistry that you get on together. Because, you know, the average holding time for a company, for a venture capital fund is like 8 years. ClickTech, when we exited that, we had been a shareholder for 13 years. So you're camping out for a really long time. There's a lot of likeness with a marriage. You have to have the kind of relationship where you actually are able to quarrel and have a proper argument and make friends again. And that kind of relationship has to be sustainable for a long time.
But don't you think it's kind of like doing a recruitment decision? So you, in my position, I can choose the people I work with. So, and that goes sort of for all parts of the company. And also, I think that we're essentially creating a product which no one has of our customers. So sometimes it's really hard to figure out how long things are going to take. And you need a lot of faith within the organization and also from the board in order to continue executing on a plan, even if it takes longer. So I think that it's actually a truth with modification. I do think that there are some companies where relationships are way more important. Our take was that we were such a company, so hence us doing this.
Yeah.
But confidence and trust, I think, are key words.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of overhead if you need to communicate with someone every week if they're nervous. So I mean, in one way, people say that being privately owned allows you to sort of jump out of this whole stock market quarterly mentality. Whereas in some cases, when I advise startups, I see that their board, including myself, has an attention span of a week. So we expect them to deliver every week. Whereas what you would want to do is to give them longer time than a quarter. That's not always the case. I think that's a really tricky part.
So in terms of that personal chemistry and so on, I guess, I mean, just before you actually make the investment, there's hard negotiations and so on that can be quite tough. And then once you've actually invested, I mean, you're all in the same boat, you're in the same team. So the relationship, does that develop very naturally afterwards, that you're now friends and you're in the same team, or that's just very natural kind of?
Well, there are things to do. There is a plan, obviously, on which we have invested and which is to be executed. And you sort of you start digging into that plan and contribute what you can as an investor, which is basically trying to support a team. I mean, when we invest, we invest in a team, and we try to make everything we can to help the team execute on the plan. I mean, it's not like we are building the company, it's the entrepreneurs who are building the company. Then, of course, it's down to what challenges the company meets during this journey. But you have the plan, and obviously you start executing that, and then you again, I'm coming back to confidence and trust. You expect the the entrepreneur, if the company faces unexpected problems, which all companies do, we know that when we invest, just bring them up on the table and have a look at them, and then come up with an idea on how to solve it.
Yeah.
But for me, it's really about, so for us, we've been fortunate in the sense that you have a plan and then you execute on that plan. So I think that so long as you execute on the same plan, even if it goes faster or slower, you're okay. The problem becomes when you change the plan, because that's a big step. So you say that we were wrong in our assumptions. The wrong segment, it's the wrong product, maybe the right area and the right people, but we're going to do this instead. I've been at that point in other companies, so I know that that's a really trying period. I wouldn't say that. I mean, you have arguments with your colleagues, so we have disagreements in our board as well.
Yeah.
I think that's healthy. I mean, if everyone just cheers one another on, you'll eventually go off a cliff.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the plan, what is the plan right now actually to use the money for?
That was way back.
But I should add that pile of money is already used.
Okay, so what was the plan?
So we did an add-on investment some time ago, and well, let you.
No, but the plan was essentially to roll out our platform, just prove it in the Nordics.
Yeah.
So we're now market leader in the Nordics, so that was good. And right now we're using sort of the next tranche of the money to build out international sales. So just essentially preparing to do a massive rollout. So it's fairly straightforward if you have a product that works and you've established a pricing which has economics. You can see that, you know, if we just land a customer, well, if that didn't cost us too much, it's going to be a good thing. So the problem is that what I felt was that we had to come so far. I mean, it's a small company, but it's kind of there already. And people think of us as, you know, seed/early stage, whereas in the States, I mean, when you do an investment at early stage, you sometimes have nothing. So I think that's a sort of a shift in expectations, which I can elaborate to on a long time. So let's not. Yeah.
But so in terms of challenges, I mean, you talked about the importance of the trust and the personal chemistry, and you seem to, you know, come along very well. But I mean, in terms of the challenges, what should people here really think about after an investment like this? You know, what are the kind of generic problems that could come up, for instance?
Oh.
First one is changing the plan.
Yeah.
So that's a big step. Even if in any company, it's a big step to say we were wrong. So I wouldn't say that that's an issue not only with investors but with everyone within the company. And we've had so the first thing we created was a Photoshop for copywriters. Since you're not using it, you know that didn't really happen. So, and this is actually our fourth. It took us 4 iterations. It's the same idea essentially, that we want to make sure online advertising is great and profitable, but the attack vectors on that problem has matured over time. And luckily, since we brought you on board, we've sort of, the theory of what's important and what matters is kind of working. And I think that's my takeaway from that process, is that raising money is kind of fair. So we had a tough time funding the company up until the point where we actually had something. And once we had something, it was kind of easy. So that's my takeaway, is that life is kind of fair.
Well, I would like to add, I mean, what we see as investors, typically the main challenge is time and quality. Things always takes longer time than you think. And impatience is a danger and a virtue at the same time. And I would say we're not at all surprised as investors if things take longer time than you know, according to the plan. And as entrepreneurs, you should always be fair and honest and say, okay, we have encountered this problem and this is going to take longer time. And the right investor would answer then, all right, we understand, but don't cut corners and compromise with quality, because you only get that one chance of making a first impression when you go out on the market with your product. And I think that is probably the most usual thing. Things never go according to plan, and it's almost always that it takes longer.
But I can also go the other way. So in our case, we expected the sales cycle for our product to be 9 months, and it was 3. So we had no resources to manage the customers that we brought along. So, and that's also an issue, and it's not necessarily, I mean, it's a great problem in one way, but as I said, if you have unhappy customers that don't get the product that they purchased, well, you're going to lose business. So I would say timing in general is, but it's manageable, as Johan says. If you communicate it and you explain it, people are sort of okay with it.
Yeah.
The issue becomes when you change fundamentals, and that's when you see whether people are up for this or not. And my thing of doing it was the same as when we recruit people. You do references. You check up on people, saying that has this guy been in a bad spot, yes or no? How did he react?
Which I have as an entrepreneur previously.
I'll let you say it.
Well, I've both been successful with my ventures and made huge mistakes and disasters. So I know that. And that's absolutely true.
But don't you think it's sort of near impossible to predict how someone will react to a tough spot? I mean, you can only see what the track record there.
Sure, and that's why one of the important things when we invest is the process itself, because in that process you get to learn each other and you understand how you react to issues in the negotiation and critical questions. You can understand by now, I think, that one of the reasons Gustav and I get along with is that we both like to talk a lot.
And for no, but just on a final note, I do think that it's one of the few information arbitrages that a startup has on their investors is that the reason they're investors is that they have track record, often good or bad. As an entrepreneur, Johan basically has to bet on us being able to manage a tough spot. So as an entrepreneur, you can actually do a fairly educated guess whether they will help out once shit hits the fan.
Yeah. And we always, at least that goes for me as an investor, because it's personal. I'd much rather invest in a great team with a shitty business idea than the other way around. Because you know the shit is going to hit the fan one way or the other over time. And if you have a great team, they will be able to adapt. And that's also, you know, my advice to you when you're asking for venture capital. You know, the team and the way you put together the team and how you are as a team is for me at least the most important thing.
Just a quick note on everyone. How many are doing a startup, either sort of starting out or are actively doing this? So you would know that everyone says the team, not the market, not the product. That's other people's problems, okay? You guys need to make sure you have the best team, the best product, the best market, the best everything.
I didn't say that the product wasn't important.
But so I meet a lot of startups because when we started out, there was nothing like this, so you could get no help. So I promised myself that if anyone wants anything, I'd be up for breakfast, coffee, or lunch, or whatever, right? So I see these, like, we have a great team. And I was like, okay. So where's the product? What's the market? No, but we've read that the team is the most important thing. I think it's easy to assume the perspective of an investor.
Yeah.
So you can't settle for anything. You can't, and I hate when people come to me saying that, you know, I'm not really big on working hard, but I'm really productive. And I say, yeah, sure, but you don't get to choose. In our company, you work long, you work hard, and you're smart.
Yeah.
And more often than not, you don't really succeed with all three, but that's the ambition. And you need that across everything you do, because that's sort of, people see through it.
But dare to think big. I mean, it's gotten much better since I started in venture capital 5 years ago. Dare to think big as entrepreneurs. Take on, if you are not telling me as an investor how big it can be, how big can the company become, I'm not the one to tell you. So you have to tell me. Have a great vision, and as I said, it's become much better in Sweden than it used to be. But and of course, it's a great entrepreneurial thing to build a company which has a turnover of 20, 50 Swedish million. It's not a venture case.
So I wanted to ask about something else that at least can be a challenge and a problem in the sector I come from. So in biotech, many of the innovators are scientists that are really good in the technology and so on. But once you actually reach the market, etc., you need someone with the business skills, an entrepreneur, etc. And I guess this can be a problem where maybe now you're going global, I guess, where you as an entrepreneur see that you are the guy that should continue as a CEO and so on, and the investor might see this differently, or?
Well, it's typically one of the things you discuss, one way or the other, when you invest. And as I said again, if there is confidence and trust as a foundation for your relationship, that, to my experience, is less of a problem. We don't know. Given what I think at this point right now, and I'm sure this will be the case over time, Gustav and his team is the kind of team which will be able to grow with the company.
I mean,
and they're up for the challenge. And they have the combination of extremely great technical skills, market understanding, execution skills, and also a combination of great visions and cockiness with humbleness.
There's no doubt there's confidence here, I can see that.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, you want the best possible team to execute on the plan you have at any given point in time. I sort of get tired of that discussion, so when people ask me, what will you do in 2 years? I don't know. I mean, we work with a 3 to 6 month plan, and we try to execute it like hell, and we make sure that we have the best people to do that, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to worry about anything else. Like, that's not, it's not a problem. If you can execute well on 3 to 6 months,
excellent.
Easy as that.
And by the end of the day, it's about building shareholder value. And in the usual case, the entrepreneur is a big shareholder. And when the time comes where you have to sort of look at how should this company be led, there's also the value. There's always the value of the company at stake there. And I would say the modern entrepreneur has a humbleness in that situation. If there's someone else who could do better as the CEO of the company, most entrepreneurs, at least from my experience, are willing to take another role in the company.
I think it goes for all roles, right? I have no idea what it's like to be a CEO of a company with 1,000 people.
But you'll find out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we'll see.
That's fun, huh?
We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a problem I'd love to have.
Yeah.
Thinking about, am I right for this job now? I can live with that.
Very good. Let's see if there's a couple of questions from the audience as well.
Yep, so we've got one question from Daniel Löfqvist. So, von Sydow, if you knew what you know today, would you have focused on a launch internationally / in the US instead of beginning with the Nordics?
If I knew what I knew today, I'm trying to think, what do I know today? I think that we'd have done the exact same thing, actually. I do think that the process is, if you're building a product that's with mass market potential, and you think that the problem is generic, there's no reason not to go sort of pursue the easiest way, which is to do it at home. I do think that we did one thing right, though, which is to start building a network of customers, partners fairly early on. So when we go to the US now, we have 10 companies that we can partner with, and we don't have to wait a year until we get there. So start preparing early, make the trips to the key markets, but make sure that you don't spend too much time thinking about, how we're going to do this. Like, you execute on one market, if that makes sense, and stick with it.
That's an amazing thing with Gustav and Burt. It's for me, it's amazing in how many places, with how many persons and key persons in the venture industry and the business they're in, that they already have Burt on the radar.
I mean, I think it takes time to build things up, so you need to do it from the start, but I'm not sure you need to launch in order to get that. So we launched, quick thing, we launched a freemium version of one of our products, so we had 400 agencies signing in within 2 days, which is just insane, and we're 4 people. And we had no upsell, because we figured that we'll sort that out. So all of a sudden you have 400 agencies wanting to use your product, and there's no way to make money off them. So that's not necessarily a great way of doing things. So I think that if there's a way for you to scope down, to focus on one segment, one market, do that. If there isn't a way, don't. But even Facebook managed to get a rollout where they could focus on geographic markets, and even within those geos, they could focus on the college segment. So there's always a way to scope down market. I do think that I've learned the hard way.
Do we have one quick, really last question?
Yeah, one that sort of relates. So you started out in the Nordics, as mentioned. What was the reason, was that the reason that you went for Swedish investment as well? Or would you have had?
The reason we did that was the terms that we got when we were in the US often had had a lot of things and strings attached to them. So we needed to do a lot of things that didn't necessarily make sense for the company. And we figured that if we can get an equal amount of value add back home, we'll do it here. I mean, you want to follow the law of least resistance. You don't want to overthink things. So you want to see, okay, what's the plan? And then you figure, so what are the best components that fit in? People, board, money, and then you go with it. So I'm not sure if that's the right way to think, but that's the way we execute.
Sure.
Very nice.
Go for the stars. And by the way, if you want to talk more to us at Industrifonden, I'm going to be here for a while, and I also have a few of my rockstar colleagues, Malin and Hadar. Maria is here. So we have a couple of billion Swedish to invest. We have invested a couple of billion as well, but there's a couple of billion left for you. So don't hesitate to look us up. Okay?
Good news. Do you also have a last comment, Gustav?
Hang in there.
So thanks. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please take a book as well. Thank you.
Thank you.